Welcome back, podcast fans. I'm your host, Annette Hines, and this is Parenting Impossible, the Special Needs Survival Podcast. I know every week I tell you I'm so excited about this show, but this show, I am so excited. I have with me today, I'm so honored, Jay Silverman, who is just excelling as a leading director, a producer, a photographer of award-winning films, television, digital, and print campaigns. And he has a new movie coming out, or maybe it's out already, called Camera. And it is such a brilliant viewpoint. I'm just going to say that. I want him to speak for himself, but Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show. I am beyond excited to talk to you about this movie.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to share Annette with you and your viewers. Um, I think the passions that the movie kind of displays.
Yeah.
To me, when I made Camera, my biggest goal was to create a story that not only moved people but inspired. And
Yeah.
I know your podcast talks to parents and talks to human beings that want to make a difference, or are
Mhm.
people that are in challenging positions that want to perhaps be inspired by people that got through things they'd already gone through.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
one of
I'm
my mottos that I talk about all the time is create the things you wish existed. And this movie is an amazing look at how that can happen. Something that is, you know, we don't have to wait for the government to give us, we don't have to beg other people. It's creating a vision of a life. And I'm so interested to find out, how did you get interested in this topic? What led you to want to make this movie?
Well, this is my fourth film, and all my movies have some connectivity to my own life.
Hmm.
I was a photographer and I still am a photographer for over 40 years. I became a director about 20 years ago, and I predominantly work on properties that are um, designed to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
That basically is storytelling through either real stories or inspired by real stories, to kind of like share um, inspiration and wisdom.
Mm, yes, so much so. And so how does this come about? Does a script come to you? Do you actually collaborate with people that you know in the industry? How does that work?
Well, I want to kind of like answer your first question in conjunction with this question.
Hmm.
Here's what happens. I'm a production company in Los Angeles. I have a producer named Bethany Sorona that finds projects. Camera was a screenplay from a gentleman named Jamie Murphy out of, believe it or not, Ireland. And
Wow.
we met on the phone after Bethany brought me um, the property to review, because she knew, as she knows with all my movies, that I will support a film that has messaging that's going to inspire people.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, relatability is critical, because for me to be able to go, I can see that character being my daughter, which is true.
Yeah.
If you want, you know what I think I want to do is just in 30 seconds tell your audience what the movie's about. Is
Yes,
that
let's do
okay?
that. And take more than 30 seconds because the premise is beautiful.
Sure. Camera is a movie about a young child that suffers from a, a level of mutism that was, um, interestingly enough, identical to my own daughter.
Hmm.
My daughter was born 3 months premature
Mm.
at 1.9 pounds, and that experience that she had in the hospital for 6 months in the NICU resulted in her being incubated so many times that they damaged her vocal cords,
Yeah.
which essentially made her a mute for many years until she started to whisper and it became manifested itself into, I was able to understand what she was saying.
Right.
But but that challenge helped us modify the protagonist in the movie, um, that was originally written for a deaf child.
Okay.
And it's super important to me to be able to relate to the subject matter. So here I
Yeah.
was, a photographer. I had a very young age, almost the same age as Oscar, the protagonist in the movie. And I really desperately, wanted to be a photographer. And I was only 15.
Mm.
So in the movie, Oscar is brought to a small fishing village with his mother, who happens to be a widow,
Mm-hmm.
and also into a place that neither of them lived before. So they were tackling not just the obstacles of trying to adjust to a new community, but real, abuse, not just bullying from other children because Oscar couldn't talk,
Right.
but also her being treated like an outsider and
Mm-hmm.
her juggling two jobs and her being a mother, a single mother of one child in a new community. And what ends up happening is Beau Bridges, who plays the character Eric, becomes a an invaluable kind of mentor
Yeah.
to Oscar, and together they capitalize on each other's wisdom. and
Mm-hmm.
and it's, I share this with you because at this moment in my story, I have to share that Beau Bridges has given a lot of interviews about the movie, and in his interviews he said, the one thing that I believe transpires in this film that's monumentally fulfilling is the fact that we both are broken, the
Yeah.
protagonist as well as the mentor. And Bo um, was just such an extraordinary kind of mentor that he came, kind of like uh, resuscitated his whole career. And
Oh,
he was just a fix-it man, and he repairs the camera that the young
yeah.
little boy has and makes it work and gives him wisdom. And what I think the film shows is how a young child's vision, because the movie is called Camera, his interpretation of the world is entirely different than yours and mine. He
Right.
sees the world through young eyes. And I don't want to give away the film, but if you were to hand five cameras to five different people and show them what to photograph, they're all going to come out differently.
Sure.
In his case, we're talking about conceptually understanding how, these bullies are affecting him, how the townspeople are treating the mom and the child like, outsiders and really disrespectful. So that's kind of the primary basis. It's a beautiful film that takes place in a small fishing village, and it kind of shows the humanity of all of us. And
Yes.
especially during this time with, you can't turn on the television without negative news and
Yeah.
negative politics. So what you really have is an opportunity to escape and watch the film
Mm-hmm.
camera and enjoy what I consider to be, one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life. And I want to share one thing with you in that we had a premiere at a local theater, and I met, a bunch of women that were in their 50s that came to the screening, and I asked them, what motivated them to come to the screening. And
Yeah.
they said, well, the lady says, I have two children that are on Down syndrome. Another
Mm.
lady says, I've got a crippled older son. Another lady says, my son can't speak. And before you know it, I recognized something that was monumentally unexpected, and that was that the movie's affecting people especially parents of children with challenges, in a way that they don't have content available outside of documentaries
Mm,
that inspire young people and inspire parents to recognize
yeah.
that, you talk about children being resilient, but you talk to this group of people and they go, we don't care what the disability is. What we're inspired by is the messaging, because the messaging is that no matter what obstacles you got, you can put your best foot forward and inspire to be as good as you can be.
Yeah.
And it's been depicted in a lot of other movies throughout my career, but that was so exciting for me to be able
Mm,
to formulate a story
yeah.
that addresses, a community and shows
Right.
how one little kid can change the whole community.
So that is what, oh, I have so many things I want to say, but to me, I took out of this, and it's going to be so personal to everybody, right? But I share somewhat of your story. I had a 29-week preemie, 2 pounds, and lived the NICU life, and then,
You,
chronic disabilities.
wow.
And my daughter passed away at 17, 10 years ago. So, we have that too. Um, that's not shared between us, thank goodness for you, but just everybody's experience is going to help them, take something from this film that's a little different. And just like the premise of the film, where anybody behind the camera is going to take a picture that's a little bit different because their view is different. That's the same thing for people just experiencing the film, that we're going to take something different out of it.
Right,
But
right.
what I got from this, and by the way, that mom character, brilliant acting, brilliant, just beautiful. Just,
Okay.
I can't even express how connected I felt to that
Can I
character.
can I interrupt you for 1 second? So Jessica Kennedy, who plays that mom, and I give Bethany Sorona a lot of credit, my producer, because I'm not a woman, A, and B, I don't know how women can be critically overviewed that a man wrote her role,
Mm,
and we rewrote that role. Not that the original script didn't have a beautiful female character. However, that character is so authentic, and she
yes.
plays that character so authentically that your compliment resonates beyond words. Because I did not want to do what a very good friend of mine, who I really respect, wanted me to do, which is soften her so she's more likable. You know,
No,
look at your response.
no. No, it needs to be real. It needs to be raw. It needs to be our story as a parent of a disabled child or a child with challenges. Like, no, especially, I mean, I single parented all through my kids growing up.
Mhm.
And there's so many of us who really have experienced that journey. And I would have been upset if it was all,
You,
lollipops and,
I
rainbows.
have to share this with you because there's a movie on Netflix that's called, and I pitched this. I hope the filmmaker learns that I was an admirer, but it's a British movie called I Used to Be Famous. You can get it on Netflix. It's an
Mm,
old movie, 10 years old, but it's a story about a child that is a drummer and he's under 18, and the mother has dedicated her life to this child.
mm,
He's on the spectrum and he's got some pretty significant challenges. But the point that I'm bringing out is no different than you. I was so blown away by the mom's depiction, because
mm.
the mother had sacrificed being a ballerina. The mother had sacrificed all these things to raise a child.
Yeah.
And the movie, is quite inspiring, because at 18, she learns to recognize that it's time to let the dove fly out of the house.
Mm.
And it's inspiring. But I bet you 9 other people look at it and go, boy, that little boy became a great drummer. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You see what I'm
Have
saying?
you seen the caregiver movie called Unseen? It's
No.
a documentary. You should check that out. It's not a big movie,
Right.
but it is such a good discussion of what it means to be a caregiver in our world these days and how we are basically invisible, you know?
See, this is a real interesting point. Not that your audience won't find this interesting or not, but it's like I made a movie called Girl on the Edge. It's my first movie. And my daughter at 50, I have three daughters, at 15 years old, started missing school, started missing her grades. And next thing you know, she started experimenting with drugs. And then she started to um, behave just unattainable. And we ended up, in that moment that every parent who's got challenges will tell you, what the F can we do? We
Right.
have, there's no rules. There's no navigation. Do
Yep.
we, so if in that we read depicted, because you'll see me and my character in that movie, it stars Peter Coyote. It's a really good film.
Yeah.
It was my first movie. And the reason I'm making a big point of this is because your audience wants to, for lack of a better word, inspire and share each with stories with each other. Coincidentally, we have a similar story with our daughter,
Yeah.
and we didn't know where to go. And I use this analogy, who do you call Ghostbusters?
Right.
It's a joke, but the reality is that there's no you can't go on the internet what to do if your child misses, because there's so many categories. Well, it turns out after we sent her to treatment that she was raped, and that essentially started the chain reaction of not showing up to school, sampling drugs, figuring out ways to avoid dealing with what had happened to her. And
Okay.
it's tragic,
Mm.
but the reason I made the movie was to show that journey, but also show the fact that if it wasn't for equine therapy, I don't think she would have survived.
My
And
daughter did therapy,
who would
equine
have ever
therapy.
heard of that? That
Oh, horses are amazing. They're such uh, naturally bonded to people and emotional side of people. Yeah, I could talk about that for days too.
no, but I
Um,
mean, getting back to your question about what made me make the movie, I make movies that I can relate to.
mhm,
And it's critical for me from an authenticity standpoint that I have
yeah,
some framework to stand on
yeah,
that I believe is true. As an example, I was interviewed for a podcast, I don't know, a month ago, and it was a great podcast. But she started the conversation by saying, why in the world would you choose to use the word retarded coming out of a child's mouth? And I
mm,
said, because children are mimics of their parents. Their parents say that word and they go out in public and use it against a third party.
yeah.
I hate to say it. This is human behavior. What am I going to do? Adjust that dialogue so the characters are quote unquote culturally authentic? No, I want it to be real.
That's what I'm
You
saying,
see,
real and raw.
yeah.
Telling our stories, and this is exactly what you're talking about. Telling our stories is so important, and it goes beyond inspiration or motivation. We really all need to be seen, and seeing ourselves and our family situations in movies that gives us a framework or gives us a path to get on is amazing. But even without getting that path, just being able to know that you you exist, that there are other yous out there, that you're not alone. I mean, I wrote a book about our story and it did very well. And it was really to just not necessarily get out there saying, oh, here's all the three things that you need to do. It's so that people could connect and know that they're not going through this alone. This journey is very lonely for a parent. It's very lonely for a child. Um, we really disconnect from people that scare us in life and in our communities. And you've experienced this firsthand in your family and now through several movies that you've made. Your movie reminds me of the Peanut Butter Falcon.
Oh, that's a
I,
compliment. Thank you.
I love that movie, and
I,
I thought also so real. I had somebody come up to me after they saw that movie to say, well, that's not very realistic. What young person lives in a nursing home? I'm like, are you kidding me?
yeah, see,
Sit down and let me explain to you how that happens, you know?
you know, I'm saying this because you motivate me to address the reason why I do all this. I do all this to share, and that's the bottom line. And I'll tell you something that's a paradox is I have three beautiful daughters. They're all in their late 20s, and each and every one of them I have asked me, how is it that you could do all this magic with your movies, but when it comes to us, I, and I'm not saying they've asked me, I misspoke. I've told them, you know, I try to get them to get motivated and do this, and it doesn't work. But it'll work with your kid if your kid was sitting here, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that in itself is a little bit of, and it's not uncommon that a parent can't wrangle their own children but can
Mhm.
wrangle others, you know?
Yeah, Jay, that's very profound because it
Eh,
is just so
You want to hear
gobsmacking the
something?
truth.
Even more profound? So my three daughters come from a broken marriage where their mother had mental illness,
Mm,
and the mother got out of the picture after I got full custody, and now it's been 20 years, okay, and they have not seen their mother, and
mm,
the outcome of it is that they're all in talk therapy
mm,
and at different levels of understanding, but all damaged. And one
wow.
day, just in the last week, my older daughter confronted me and says, "Why don't you get help?" And I said to her, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "Well, you were abused too." And I've never ever thought of that.
Mhm.
So here you, and I'm so sorry, lost your daughter at how old? 18, as you said?
She was 17 when she died.
17. I can't, and there's no way I can even understand that. But I have to ask you the question. You probably do the same kind of questioning I do. Did you ever at that time get help for yourself?
A little bit, but not what,
Yeah,
no, not
exactly.
what I should have.
I mean, listen to this story. And, I'm a filmmaker, so I tell stories. This is an extraordinary story. I'm with my partner, and she and I are in Napa. We're going to a wedding. I meet a woman there, and the woman is probably in her late 50s. And because I'm an extrovert, I look at her and I go, "Excuse me, I'm trying to get to that item there." And she looks at me and I go, "What's your deal?" And she laughs. And one thing leads to another. I said, "Where are you from?" She goes, "New York City." And I said, "We were just there a month ago. We went to the 9/11 uh, memorials. Unbelievable." I said,
Mhm.
and she turned white. And I looked at her and I said, "What's going on?" And she says,
Wow.
"Well," and I knew it was going to be that moment. And
Yeah.
she didn't lose somebody, which is what you would initially think. No, she was, I have to be careful what I say, but she was in the capacity working for the fire department way at the top. And her job was to manage fragments of human bodies that still are on top of buildings or found. And what they have to do is they have to recover those items and notify the families, and then the families have to bring the bodies out of the caskets and add that fragment to the casket. Can you just imagine? And as she's telling me this, tears are rolling down her eyes, and I could see with clarity beyond description that this has traumatized this woman. And she says, "Yeah, I had a nervous breakdown and I resigned." She was way at the top. Okay. And who would have even thought that that job even existed? You see
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So you don't realize what's going on around you unless you
Yeah.
hear stories or you see a movie, and I mean, I was mesmerized by this. And that's what we tried to do with camera, because I did not hire Miguel Gabriel, the little child, to play Oscar, the protagonist, or one of two protagonists in my movie, without discovering that he had speech issues himself when he was young. And that in itself is an inspiring story, because little Miguel, when he was young, could not formulate a full sentence without stuttering
Mhm.
and having command of his voice. So they brought in doctors, they brought in speech therapists, and that experience created bullying that was, real.
Yeah.
So for him to take the role, which I'm sure you'd agree, he jumps off the screen and he doesn't say a
Yes.
word,
Yes.
is kind of like, the gold in any activity where you really truly see that this little kid in real life, not in my movie, was able to turn that trauma into, now he does movies for Disney as a voice.
Yeah. He, I can't wait to see what his career is like,
Oh, it's
honestly.
it's it's extraordinary. It's it's he's
Yeah.
anyways, I never
And
take credit for his performance, because this child is, and he's not only made the movie magical, but this child, uh, he just blew Bo Bridges away, and he
mhm.
knew more about the movie than I did.
And it's funny because we're not really talking about Bo, and he was great too,
Oh, Bo's
obviously.
off the charts,
But
but you see, you'd expect from a man in
yes.
his 80s to be able to deliver a wealth of this and that.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not even talking as an actor, but as a human being. He's had so many life experiences
Mhm.
that he shared with me that are actually in the movie, that are replayed. That scene in the movie, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a scene where he talks about a an otter um, going through its daily routine. Did you see that scene?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he says, after they eat, and if they have anything left, they stick it under their arm and they save it for later.
Yeah.
Well, he has a grandson that does the same thing with crackers, okay? And he re-extrapolated that, and that's what makes that scene so funny in the movie, because
Yeah.
it's actually a true story on top of an authentic depiction of what the animal really does.
Amazing. I would have never guessed that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. What a great story.
But this is what makes filmmaking so fulfilling, because you said at the beginning of this conversation, we all interpret things through our own eyes. And
Yeah.
you may be moved by one thing and somebody else be moved by something else. Would I have thought that a woman that has two Down syndrome children would be affected so profoundly from this movie? The reality of it is, children love the film, and I never expected that, because they can see the journey. They
Yeah.
can see, oh, he overcame bullying. How did he do it?
Right.
He
Yeah,
didn't
I
call the
connected with
police.
it. My daughter was also nonverbal, but she had such a big personality and just drew people to her, and to watch her really, and believe me, there was bullying, there was a lot of hard times, there was a lot of exclusion. I could tell stories for days about that. But there were also people who were just so captivated by her, and she brought them into her world. And the thing about the disability community that I think we would all like the non-disabled community to understand is that we are not takers, we are givers. We, as a member of our community, have something to give. And this relationship between Bo and this little actor, Miguel, was that, it was symbiotic. And that is an important message for the outside the disability community to understand. We are not just giving to people who are so, down and out and who can't do anything for themselves. We're not here as a charity. Everybody in our community holds value. and not just space. And the message was loud and clear on that.
It's really profound what you're saying because um, I don't consider my daughter with the voice issue being disabled, and I don't encourage her to think of herself as being disabled. However, she worked at a retail store during the pandemic, and she was bullied every day.
Mm,
People would say to her, "Hey, why are you at work? You clearly got a cold.
yeah.
You must have COVID." And every day that was the message. And she, because of her own story, she was unwilling to tell them the fact. You know, it's one of those movies where you go, just tell that idiot woman that you, this is your real voice. You lost it at birth, you know. I was only 1.5 pounds. You know, you tell that story. She will never do that. She
Hmm.
doesn't want to be a victim, you know.
Yeah. And it's her story to tell or not. And it's her journey to live
I
as
get it.
she wants to.
No, but I do believe it's my job as a filmmaker to tell stories that are authentic, which means that the movie that I made before camera called Saving Paradise, which incidentally is on Amazon right now for free, Amazon Prime, is a story kind of like, you know, It's a Wonderful Life, a
Hmm.
contemporary version of that. And you meet in the first 10 minutes a character that's on the spectrum, and he's a little bit like Dustin Hoffman was in that famous movie with
Hmm.
Tom Cruise. And why do I mention this? You know, we could have casted an actor to pretend like he had been on the spectrum, or we did what we did, which is we found a casting company in Los Angeles that had a array of professional actors that had disabilities. And so now when you watch that movie, you might think twice about saying, you know, that character isn't authentic when he's the real thing. You know what I
I
mean?
wanted to ask you about that because the disability community has in recent years
Oh,
been making a big uproar about
huge.
having more people in front of the camera and behind the camera who truly have a disability or, medical fragility or challenges. And it's just, I think it's slow, for Hollywood to sort of pick up that ball
It's
and run with it.
I wouldn't agree with you because I really think that inclusiveness, and that includes race, you know, is something that Hollywood is high on their list. So, for conversation purposes, you know, I want to hire extras in a big scene with a handicapped individual to play a character. I want to have the unexpected. I'm watching one of my favorite shows on TV is a show called Slow um, um, Slow Horses on Apple TV, and
Mm,
they've got a character that's in a wheelchair that is, you know, incapable of doing anything without someone's help. Um,
mhm,
and it's a beautiful character. And I've seen another TV show called Lucky Hank, where a woman who's clearly got challenges, and
mm.
she's in a wheelchair, and she has to talk with a device. And these are real people that have disabilities, but they also are so talented, just
Yes.
beyond. And George Steves, who plays this character in my last movie, is brilliant. And I could not have had a real actor emulate what he
Yeah.
did.
Mhm.
And I don't think I have any business trying. That's how
Right.
I feel at my age. Versus, you
I'm
know,
so glad. I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I'm
and
glad that you have such optimism around
well,
Hollywood.
yeah, I do have optimism because I think Hollywood is a trendsetter in respect to inclusiveness, and it's pretty difficult now to see any TV show without integrated cast and
Mhm.
without a an effort to try to put people with disabilities in roles,
Hmm.
and it may not be as much as the community would prefer, never enough, but
Hmm.
in my mind, it's a hell of a start.
Yeah, the effort's there for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. It's
Well,
interesting. I tell you this, I had a TV show called The Cleaner with Benjamin Bratt, and it was another stage of my life because it's a TV show about an interventionalist. It was created by my team, and then after my show was over, they made Ray Donovan. Ray Donovan was a show about an extreme interventionalist.
hmm.
Um, but I did it with the real guy, and obviously they turned it into a drama. Why do I mention it? Is because um, nobody even knows what goes on for a person that is unwilling to step up and get help. How do you
Yeah,
help those people? Because they need help too. If you look at the streets in Los Angeles where people with challenges, mental illness, it takes a special group of people to capture their interest in getting off the street. It's no
true.
longer, the stereotype of just people out of work. These
Yeah,
people have no place to go because of the medical system in our state.
yeah,
And I think New York's got even a bigger problem. So why do I made a TV show about it because I wanted to show that there are people out there that you would think don't even exist.
mm,
And I watched it in real life, in real time. And there was a wonderful scene, and this shows you the advancements of um, cinema. So this was in 2000, I think 2016. I made that TV series, and we presented a script to the studio, and the studio has Benjamin Bratt sitting in a bar at a restaurant, at the bar at a restaurant, and ordering food. And a beautiful woman comes up to him and takes his order. And she looks at him and he looks at her. And we wrote, that they leave together. Okay. They said, no way. The studio. Now, I make my movies independently, which means I can do whatever I want to do. The
yeah,
studios didn't want to do that. Nowadays, they would do that
right.
because she was an amputee, a double amputee. You didn't know because she was behind a counter. But when he went to meet her, she rolls out in a wheelchair and she has no legs. And the production the I don't want to name the studio, but the studio says no, we can't do that. Well, look at how far we've gone.
Yeah,
Since
yeah,
that's 12,
that's
15 years
amazing.
later.
Well, I love this film and I want to ask you what's next for you? You're working on something else right now?
We are very excited about it. It's a movie called Yale, and it's a true story about a man who is in his 70s, who abandoned his daughter when she was 9 years old
Mm,
and caused severe post traumatic stress on the young child.
mm,
And that woman today would be in her late 30s, early 40s, has a 12-year-old son, and that
mm.
son needs an organ or he won't survive. And subsequently, what transpires is she has to do the unthinkable, and that is reconnect with a despicable father 35 years later that she hasn't seen. And
Mm,
what she ends up learning is not only is he a bit of a character himself,
mm.
but he's also an individual that's a bigamist. And that kind of triangulation of his other children and him, that's how they find the organ. So it's a pretty cool story.
Wow. Is that based on something
It's
real
based on a true
too?
story, yeah. And I'm
Oh,
telling I'm
cool.
telling it's inspired by a true story. But I'm telling you this because just like with Camera and my other movies I've mentioned, what gets me excited here is the idea that the movie's really it's a dramatic comedy, but the movie is really a movie you'll be able to watch because so many people suffer from post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And to think that all three of my daughters indirectly have some degree of it
Right.
because of their experience with their biological mother, I have to say, as a filmmaker, to want to tell this woman's story, it'll be easier for me to have those life experiences because this woman is struggled her whole life because of the abandonment and the reconnection with her father. And that's, you know, could be possible for people and not possible for people, but helps her evolve to the point of moving on.
Right.
And that to me is no different than all your viewers are dealing with. Because if
Yeah.
you have to have post traumatic stress for what you lived with, not
Almost all of us do.
yeah. So to watch the journey of a woman who's got a drinking problem, who's got a social issue problem, and post traumatic stress. I mean, to me, is a story worth telling. You know, I just
Mhm.
watched a wonderful show on Netflix called I think The Father's Three Daughters. I think is what it's called. It's
Oh,
brilliant. I have three daughters.
yeah.
All the three daughters are holding court for their father who's in hospice. They're older than my daughters,
Okay.
but they have the same challenges my daughters have.
Right.
They all have different points of view and they all
Hmm.
think they know more than the next.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the movie brilliant is you watch it. And the filmmaker who made that movie, I listened to a podcast and he stated that this happened to him. It's not three of his daughters or three daughters in his family. It's his story interpreted with three women, and that's what
Mm.
makes it fun because you want to give back in some capacity
Yeah.
that's going to be fulfilling for the audience. I
So
thought it was
cool.
really a
That's
beautiful
really
movie.
cool. When do you think your new movie's going to be out?
Not till the end of next year at the
Okay.
earliest. But
And
go
for
ahead.
people who weren't lucky enough to get a copy of your movie like I did,
Yeah.
where can they see Camera?
Camera is available now on Amazon Prime to rent. Or Apple or Fantango or Voodoo or any of those right now, and I highly recommend it. And the other movies I've made are available. You just got to go on and Google them, but
Mm.
they're all available. And as a
It,
matter of fact, Saving Paradise, which I mentioned, is now available on Amazon Prime for free. Um, all I care about is people watch these movies and come away like you.
yeah.
Adds a
Well,
little candy to your day.
I really, really appreciate the type of filmmaking that you're doing and the
Thank you.
stories that you're telling because it's so meaningful to our community, but also to the non-disabled community as well. And if you ever want to make a movie out about my life, I'll be happy to share my book with you.
You should send me your book. You never know.
I would love that. I keep saying, they need to make a movie about my life because what we have lived through as a family has been amazing. And I know that everybody thinks that about their family and their life experience, but
Well,
I'll tell you.
I'm not so sure. When I told you the story about the woman I met in Napa, you know, what alarmed me about that story is number one, it's a monumental moment in time.
Mm,
Number two, you know, I make this quick analogy. When the Challenger spacecraft crashed,
yeah.
they determined that it was like a 32-cent little part
All
that
right.
failed. 32 cents. Why do I mention the analogy? Because who would have known, that a woman that is in charge of something very big post 9/11 would spend 20 years doing her very best to try to reconnect human beings with um, their loved ones. I mean, what an extraordinary story. And of course, I don't even know her story except for she told me that, and that she, woke up one morning and said it's time to quit. I can't do this anymore. And
Mm,
uh, all of us that are listening, and yourself big time included. Our journeys are our journeys, and you have this podcast that I know you're doing from your heart,
Yeah.
and it means the world to me to share. And can I tell you one quick story that I think will leave everybody inspired?
Sure.
I got this really big job to work with Ray Charles, and before I was able to work with him, I had a commitment in Washington Dulles, in Dulles Airport, by the Dulles Airport, to photograph a very famous guy. And long story short, we get there and the guy has a migraine and he can't work. So we leave early. And the flight that I was supposed to take ended up landing in the field, crashing in the field on 9/11.
Oh my God.
That's a true story. So I rush home on 9/11, and on 9/12 I'm supposed to work with Ray Charles. And I get a phone call from Ray's company, and he says Ray's stuck in Arizona because you can't fly anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
in America, because no fly. So one thing leads to another, and Ray calls George Bush. George Bush calls Ray and says, "Would you sing for us, America the Beautiful, in New Jersey?" And he says, "I'll do that, but can I ask you a favor? I need to get to LA. Will you let me fly there?" And he says, "Yes, we'll make an exception." So they let Ray, 'cause he had his own plane. So they let Ray fly to LA to shoot the job we shot. And
Wow.
so here's the beautiful part of the story. Not only did Ray make an incredible impression, but I had to walk him to the stage. So while we were walking down the hallway, he would knock on the wall and hear the echo and then proceed. Knock on the wall, hear the echo, and then proceed because he was deaf, obviously. Blind.
Blind. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I knew this because his agent had done the same thing a month before, make sure that it was easy for him to navigate.
Yeah.
So one thing leads to another, and we open up the stage door, and I don't know what got into me, but I grabbed his arm and I said, "Before we go in, Ray, I want you to envision to your left is a 60-piece orchestra, to your right is a beautiful sunset backdrop, and next to it are big 10-foot posters of you playing the piano."
Mm.
And he goes like this, and then he looks up to me and he squeezes my arm and he says, "I've been doing this for 70 years. Nobody's ever done that. Told me
Mm.
what I might see if I could see." And I think your audience would appreciate the fact that I did not do that with any intention of impressing him. I
Yeah.
did that organically and it just came out. And he said, what they do typically is they put an X on the floor and a valet walks me from A to B and sits me down and I perform. But
Wow.
now I can envision what you're describing.
Wow.
Now, I think that's a good story to end this conversation
So
because
great. Yeah.
because we're all unaware of what makes the screw turn, and it
Mm-hmm.
could just be what Bo Bridges does for that mute child when he makes a little crack and you see the guy grin for the very first
Yeah.
time in the movie,
Yeah.
or says to him, "This is very, very important. Never pick your nose in public," which was not in the script, but it came out of Bo's mouth and we used it. So I just wanted to share with you that little story.
Jay, I know this is going to sound weird, but I'm so proud of you and the movies that you're making. Thank you so much for everything that you do. I can't believe that I got to talk to you today for almost an hour. I'm so happy that we were able to do this podcast interview. Thank you so much.
Did you tell your audience that this is post the hurricane? Because if you did, they'd realize how dedicated you are to what you're doing because you got about as much time to have this interview right now as a hole in the head.
Yeah,
But thank
it's
you.
been a tough couple of weeks. It really
I
has.
can't even imagine. Well,
But
thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you
Have-
so much. It was really, really great talking with you today. And thank you for the movie camera. Everybody got to go out and see it.
Thank you so much. Oh, wait, can I tell the audience one thing?
Oh, sure.
If you go to jsilvermanproductions.com, you can see my movies and where they're playing, and you can see the trailer for Camera,
Yeah,
which I think everybody would love to understand what the hell I'm talking
absolutely.
about here.
And we're going to have a link to
Oh, good.
all of Jay's assets on in the show notes. So just scroll down when you're
Okay,
listening to this and you can bonk on it and head over to his website and also just some other contact information. So
great.
thank you for mentioning that.
You're very welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye bye.